Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
We'll wait just a couple seconds here and let everyone be admitted. Okay, well, so what I'm going to do is I've got this in a Google slide presentation, and I know that some don't like Google, don't work well with Google. Sometimes Google doesn't like me. But I will share a PowerPoint after this attached to an email. So I'll just send it to the same groups that we use to invite to this today. And then it has the links to the documents that I'll be talking about as well. So just know that that will be coming after today if you want to look back or refer back to anything that we talk about. So as always, we're going to start off with prayer, and I'll lead us if you'd all just follow along with me, please. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh God, we ask you to help us do our work in your name, bound by charity to one another. May we be penetrated by an apostolic spirit, which reaches out to all the faculty and staff in our schools, joined with us in this ministry of Catholic education. We ask you to help them give witness to Christ, the unique teacher, by their lives as well as by their teachings. May all the students and families of our schools follow your example and be generous, pure, respectful, and sincere, and find you the prophet of truth and love, the companion and friend of all, present and active in their lives. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So thanks again for joining us today. I know this is not always a fun topic, but it's a very necessary topic. So I just wanted to sort of lay some groundwork. And then, as I'm going to mention later in the presentation, we are going to be reaching out to each individual school to have some kind of one-on-one conversations. Just know that that's coming later as well. But our primary goal, now that it's really, we're heading into budgeting season, it feels like, education's a revolving door. We're barely done with the 1 year and we're already planning for the next. But that's the nature of our work. So the finance office has been working on conducting some compliance testing on the parent tuition records. And part of that is to ensure that the Lafferty, that's just, part of doing business with Monsignor Lafferty and our STO business. But in doing so, we've had some interesting findings that we wanted to go over with all of our schools. So as I mentioned, we want to do that in person or maybe, a Zoom meeting. But we'll be in touch more about that piece. I've also been collaborating with the finance department on cost per student. As you know, we update those figures each year based on previous prior year budgets. And then talking a little bit more about tuition models. We will have a budget memo for the bookkeepers and business managers on the call, pastors. We send out that budget memo. Typically, I think it's been March, and we're trying to get that out earlier so that you can all plan. A lot of you are starting to have budget conversations now. So we wanted to get that out sooner. So I'm hoping by the end of this week. And then also I've had lots of questions about that per pupil for non-corporate parishes. That will be an updated policy. And in fact, our diocesan board meets on Wednesday this week. So we should have an updated policy ready to share on that as well. So I just wanted to give you those pieces of information before we jump in today. So as I mentioned, today will be more of an overview. We will have individual meetings with each school team to come in the future. One piece that I have been telling our administrators I would work on, and I did finish over Christmas break, is a communication piece for families to help educate them on Catholic school finance. I know most families probably don't want to know about Catholic school finance. But it really is, I think we need to do a better job of helping them understand about all that goes into a tuition figure that we use. Our teacher salary. There's just a lot involved in putting a school budget together. So I did want to show everybody just a sample of what that letter looks like. And again, this is gonna be linked in the PowerPoint slide, so you'll be able to open it and make a copy and have access. And I know it's long, but it is one page. I think, anything after one page, people tend to quit. They probably quit reading after one paragraph sometimes, but this is a template that you can all use, and I've highlighted where you can plug in your school specific pieces. And I've updated it to include the ESA, how that's different for next year. So this information is just a template that you can use. I would highly encourage you all to send out some, if you don't want this letter, something similar with similar information. But I did promise that I would get this out, and so here it is. So looking ahead to budgeting for next school year, obviously, and again, some of you maybe have already started these conversations, but you'll want to begin talks about what your teacher and staff salary increases will look like for next year. Keeping in mind that public school salaries will be going up to 50,000 minimum this summer. So, I know it's a moving target. Schools have really been doing a wonderful job of trying to get their staff compensation competitive. And I know it's hard because it is a moving target, but just knowing that you'll need to have those conversations again. Don't forget your administrators that are leading the buildings. You'll want to think about expenses that might be coming for capital improvements if you need a new roof or a new boiler, or all those fun things that pop up. We've also had some conversations with administrators on just some unique budget items. We've engaged the AEA to help with cybersecurity assessments, to help do some assessments of our schools to see where our weaknesses might lie and how to strengthen those or shore them up a little bit. Catholic Charities, I know a lot of you, I think all of you, who are using their services have found them to be very helpful and very beneficial. So just continue to budget for those pieces. And then we've had conversations about various data sets that we'd like to start discussing as an administrative group. We used to do a better job of looking at data together, and we've kind of gotten away from that, especially with COVID. Now that that's passed, and we'd like to get back to that. So there is an AEA data dashboard piece, and then there's a clearinghouse, the National Student Clearinghouse. They help track postgraduate data so that we can see how successful our graduates are and what, where they are 5 years later. I think it's a really important data point that we don't typically look at. So anyway, those pieces, the schools that are involved in them should know what those figures are, but if you have questions about those as you start budgeting, please just make sure that you reach out to me. Thinking about the revenue side, obviously tuition is our primary source of revenue. We'll recommend tuition increases as we have the past couple of years based on those updated cost per student figures. Just a reminder that your tuition figures need to be voted on and approved by your school board for MLTF, and then before the budget is finalized. And we're hoping to have drafts of budgets by the end of March. I think I have that plugged in a later slide. I wanted to talk specifically about parish support. Our parishes have been so patient, and I'm so grateful for that, in allowing us some time to implement ESAs and, being patient for them, seeing a decrease in the amount of contribution to the school budget. So I am encouraging everyone that as you start to think about budgets, please start to think about what relief you can give the parish in your school budget. We are in the third year of the ESA next year, where every family qualifies regardless of income. So there should be room to give your parishes some relief. But ideally, what you'll want to do is determine what you think the school budget needs from the parish. The parish finance council on the other side of things should meet and determine what they think they can give the school budget. And then you have to have that back and forth collaboration. Whether it's a finance council member attends your school board meeting or vice versa, or you have a separate meeting, but I just encourage collaboration and communication about that piece and some back and forth. And then obviously, fundraising, that still remains an important part of our budget revenue. We depend on it less than we used to, but it's still an important piece that needs to stay in place. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions or pieces that anyone wants to talk through or discuss at this point.
I don't know how to raise my hand. This is
Just
the
speak
Jim
up.
Frederickson.
Hi, Connie.
I just wonder, how certain are we ESAs are going to be here for forever is a long time, but years out.
I get that question a lot. I feel like I got it more right when they started. And people were very fearful until they saw the money really start to flow. There was just that level of skepticism.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee. All I can say is we have very few conversations about what happens if these go away. If you give families thousands of dollars in support to go to a private school of their choice, and then all of a sudden you take that away, you're going to see a lot of turnover in the state legislature.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if we're cutting property taxes and whatnot, where's the money come from? Anyway, so it's just it feels like
I appreciate the question. I wish I had a clear answer. I just don't. So I'm going to continue to sit on the fence on that one, Father Tim, if you don't mind.
Yeah, but no, that's about all we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I just I'm pretty confident that this is going to continue. School choice is this. It has gained a ton of momentum all over the nation.
Yeah.
States that have never seen any form of it before are now having programs implemented. There's even talk of a federal tax credit now. Probably not this year, but the year after that. They're pretty confident there will be a federal tax credit implemented if they can get the Congress behind it. So it is just picking up more and more steam. So thank you for that question.
You made me feel better.
Yeah, good. Other questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So as I mentioned previously, we will have updated cost per student figures. I believe those are somewhat ready. I'm going to let my finance office colleagues who are on jump in and comment as well. But primarily, we just wanted to remind everybody the rationale for figuring these is so that folks and schools can continue to move their tuition closer to that cost per student figure. The tuition figures we've had in the past were really just artificial numbers that they weren't based on what it actually costs us to educate each and every kid in our buildings. And that lots of things play into that, your enrollment, your costs, your staff salaries, all of those things. It's a very complicated picture. But we felt it's really important to have an accurate measuring stick to base your tuition decisions on. So again, like the finance folks on the call can talk more about the details of it. If you have individual questions, they are going to be sending those out individually. So I don't know, Diane, Meryl, anybody, Jill, anybody have anything to contribute?
Yep, this is Diane, so I'll jump in here. Yeah, we did get through, and I'll give all the credit to Jill and also a couple other people in the parish accounting office. did the calculations for cost per student. So anyone who had audited financial statements, we were able to use that data. And then otherwise it was the financial reports that were submitted to the parish accounting office as of June 30. And we have a standardized cost per student. We also will share with you the operating procedure, a narrative format that would describe the calculation. And then what we'll also share is individually with each school an Excel spreadsheet so that you can see where those numbers come from and how they link throughout the calculation. And then Jill or Deb or you could reach out to any of us if you have questions on your specific calculation. And we were waiting until this meeting was done before we were going to send those out. So you could expect to get those in the next couple days.
Any questions about cost per student?
This is Diane again. Maybe I'll add one more thing, is we probably don't have the perfect formula. We have a formula that we used universally across all 15 schools. I realize that our business managers are probably doing some more detailed calculations. They might be looking at a cost for a kindergarten student versus a high school student. And I still encourage everybody to do your own calculations. But we wanted to support you with a universal calculation. So if you didn't have something you were working with, that you'd have a starting point you could get from us.
And, I know we have had questions about, well, why was this included or why was that included? And honestly, the whole goal is to just get an accurate figure. And trying to include really everything that comes into the expense of running a school. The cost of using a parish building. All of those little pieces that we don't often think about, but do factor into the cost of doing business, so. Okay, any other questions about that? Okay. I did want to spend a little more time talking about tuition models, and I've been beating this drum for the last couple of years. We really would like everyone to use a variable tuition model. And what this means is that you are going to, so let's say you've got your cost per student, let's say it's $10,000. And then you have an ESA applied to that. So just to make it easy, we're going to subtract 8,000. You also might qualify for a diocesan scholarship. You also might qualify for a local scholarship. And then that's going to be your net tuition due from your family. This is going to be different for everyone. And we have been encouraging everyone to anybody who wants any kind of a scholarship, whether it's a Lafferty, whether it's one from your local school, to use TADS and have that family fill out a TADS application to determine what they need. And we're just encouraging schools to get rid of those block grants. There are some, and in the past, I know some have moved away from this, but every family got $4,000, whether they needed it or not. And that's just, it's just not good business practice. It should be more like a college financial aid application. Like, based on this family's financial situation, this is what they can afford. Because if you're giving a block grant to everybody, some families can't afford that much, and some families can afford more than that. So we're just encouraging everyone to keep your tuition model variable based on what a family needs and what they can afford to pay. So again, I have a sample to show you what we're talking about. So here's just a sample package template that you could use. And again, the areas are highlighted where you're going to plug in different numbers. But you start off with your tuition figure. So this is your published tuition at the top. And then you're going to take off your ESA. And I've got this number highlighted because it will be a little bit different this year again. And then you're going to subtract if they're eligible for an MLTF scholarship or other through our diocesan scholarship program. And then you're gonna see if they need any local tuition assistance through the TADS app. And after you subtract all of those things, then this is what's owed by the family. Now, I do understand it is not easy. The TADS application process is not easy. I know it's lengthy. It might take an hour to fill out. But if a family spends an hour filling it out and they get $1,000, that's a pretty good return on investment. Plus then you are basing your decisions with you only have so much money available locally to give away. Then you're basing those decisions on actual data and not just guessing. This is what I think this family needs. So we're just encouraging everyone. We've done it in the past, but I don't think a lot have taken advantage of it. If your family wants local tuition assistance, please have them fill out a TADS application. You can cover the tuition fee or the application fee. We've had that question come up. Well, it costs, it's expensive to fill it out. We have schools that cover that cost for them. Now, families can choose not to do it, but then they're going to pay the full balance of whatever's left after their ESA. Right? So I'm just suggesting some ways to approach this, and some ways to manage it on your end. I'm going to stop there and ask for questions or comments or discussion.
Well, Patty, this is Diane again, and if I could offer a comment, you know, we went through 2 years of transition here with the ESAs and the schools. I mean, you guys did a fantastic job getting people to apply for not just ESAs, but also the MLTF. But I think we're into kind of a new environment here with these universal ESAs. As Patty kind of mentioned before, that tuition gap, now if we have a 10,000 tuition and 8,000 ESA is now just $2,000. And so much like when STOs or MLTF first started, they're really intended for the families who have the most financial need. And so it is a cumbersome application, but I think maybe now schools can gear their students, their neediest students, or the ones in the most needing the most financial help, towards the TADS app. And if others are, you know, finding it too cumbersome and too difficult, then, you know, they're maybe not the right candidate for that application.
Thanks, Diane. It also raises for me, like, what should be our published tuition in terms of our real cost per student? Dr. Flannery kind of corrected me the other day in a very nice way, but the public schools get $16,000 a student. Is that what you told me? Kind of. And so we're getting, you know, less than 8, but I don't know what our per pupil cost is. It seems like 10,000 is low. Should tuition be equal to the per pupil cost? And then, you know.
Yeah, that's been our goal, Father, is trying to get each school. So that's the reason for figuring these cost per student figures each year. And honestly, so the ones that schools are going to get either later today, tomorrow, later this week, you know, those are based on prior year financials. So if schools have given a 10% increase to staff, they're probably even low. But our goal has been to get all of our schools closer to that cost per student. We knew it was going to take a few years. Some are there now. But we do have some schools that are farther away from the mark and still have some work to do. But that's why we figure those cost per student figures each year, to try and make sure that they stay up to date and they're accurate.
Yeah. And if we start there, I mean, there's still going to be some that we need to find funds for, and parish funds and whatnot, but I'm especially concerned too about keeping our faculty and administrative and staff salaries up.
Right. Yeah, and there again, our schools have really, I would say in the last 2 years, have just made a lot of progress toward that, and out of necessity, because we knew we had to. But they are a lot of folks, you know, we still had some that had a longer way to go, but I've tried to visit with those schools individually and visit their boards and try and, help explain the rationale. So folks are getting there. We knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but I think people are getting there.
And as somewhat related, I'd also like to do all this in a way that we pastors can have the staff and the salaries we need in our
Yeah.
parishes as well.
Well, and again, if in this third year of the ESA, if you guys can reach an agreeable number with the parish contribution to the school budget, we're hoping that will free up some funds then that you can use to, help strengthen your religious ed programs, or, whatever your staff you've got on the parish side as well.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions about tuition models? I think I have one more slide. And again, I've been encouraging schools to do this the last couple of years as well, but I'm going to plug it again. We encourage everyone to have one tuition figure. It really simplifies things, especially then when we get into the Odyssey marketplace and we have to post our tuition. Having to post different tuition figures based on what grade the student is in, that gets really cumbersome, especially for the folks that are doing it. So we are strongly encouraging everyone to eliminate those different grade level tuition figures, to eliminate extra fees. Like we used to have technology fees, registration fees, a Chromebook fee. We're just encouraging everyone, get rid of those fees and just add it into your tuition figure. It just really simplifies things. And then eliminate discounts. So we use, again, it was all more of a marketing help for us, right? Like if you have 3 kids in our school, we'll give you a tuition break. We're just in a different time period now. And so we're just encouraging everyone, eliminate those discounts. Now, we did get questions about staff discounts. So I would encourage you to handle those on your tuition assistance side. So if you want to give an extra break because you have a staff member working in your school, then you can handle that on your local tuition assistance side, instead of just having different tuition figures. So there's a way to address it. I just think it makes it a little bit simpler to do it on the backside, if that makes sense. I already covered this one, but just a reminder, we're encouraging everyone to require a TADS app for any diocese or local scholarship. The application will open on February 1st. The deadline will be May 1 again. And we will have stacking of awards. I know that was a question everyone was interested in. So awards will be stacked again this year. Any questions on TADS?
When can we expect to receive that information to hand out to families? Like your letter and all of that?
Good. That is a great question. One I'm not quite prepared to answer, Kate. Marilyn, is Marilyn on the call? Diane, do you guys? We need to go back to.
Yeah, Marilyn's on. But like to have Patty's letter that she just showed us, I think that's going to be right after this presentation, right?
No, the TADS letter.
Yeah, Kate's talking about the MLTF and TADS information.
I think we got that scheduled to open. It's usually February 1st, but I think that is a weekend. Marilyn, I think did you select January 31st, Marilyn?
Yeah, we did find out they only open on business days. So we're going to have them open the application on January 31st. Are you talking about the parent letter that's on the TADS website? Because that'll be available. I'll go look now. I don't know if it's available at this moment, because we have changed a few of our requirements. Like we're not going to require a W-2. We've never required a W-2. We're just going to make sure that the audit team is aware of that as well. I I would say the next week or so, that should be available on the website, but I can reach out to Hannah on that too.
I have a question
Thank
about
you.
the deadline. Is it still April 1st though for our parents though?
No, it's May 1st for the application itself.
Okay,
We moved it back to May 1 last year, didn't we?
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so that'll stay the same this year.
Would supporting documents be May 8th then, at same as last year?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll give them another week after the deadline to get that in. And once that happens, the TADS audit team will no longer be asking for any documents. Everything they have on May 8th is what they will use to get any applications completed.
That's a good segue into the next slide, actually. We wanted to give everyone a heads up. The award criteria did change a little bit. Our MLTF Foundation Board met this fall, and we just had a few changes that we wanted to highlight for you. I would say, Marilyn and Diane, will you help me? I think the one is we are going to eliminate the second round. You know, we've always had a second round of awards in the fall for new families. And it's a lot of work for a very, very small number of students and families. So it was voted to eliminate that second round. So you will want to keep that in mind as you're planning for your local tuition assistance. Again, like that'll be a population you'll want to help with local tuition assistance. So like, you know, set aside a little pot to help the families that are new and don't get a TADS application filled out.
Something else that we're going back to is the awards will be on needs-based. The last couple years, we've done the same amount for everybody, just with the transitioning with the ESAs. We are doing a needs-based. So you'll be seeing different amounts of awards based on obviously their need. So it won't be as, you know, when you're submitting your Odyssey into Odyssey, you're gonna have to make sure you're getting the right awards applied to that student.
And probably the good news for all of you is that we'll no longer require that Iowa 1040 like we did. And we were also, for 2 years now, we've been trying to get assurances that they also had an ESA application. So we'll have no coordination whatsoever with whether they applied for an ESA or not. And you won't have to submit those Iowa 1040s. That was cumbersome for all of you. But you did a great job. I mean, I think we had like 2,000 MLTF recipients. And so that's credit to all of you because you got your families to apply.
And as we've done in prior years, our goal is to get the money designated to your school awarded to your school. But we need applicants for that. Each school is probably gonna look a little bit different based on the number of applicants and what they raised this past year. But we always try to get that money out to every school.
And along that line, I did just receive word that we ended up at about $2 million raised for the Monsignor Lafferty Tuition Foundation. I think it was about 54% of our goal. So just a heads up on that as well. I'm sure they'll be communicating that out to all the schools as well. Any other questions about criteria? Looks like we have a couple chats. Please restate, will W-2s be required for the TADS app?
No, we have not required them for our program. I know the audit team at TADS has asked for them. I made it pretty clear this year to Hannah to please ask them or tell them not to do that anymore. Causes confusions for the parents and more work for your schools. She said she would communicate that and then we'll continue to monitor it. If you guys are running into situations where they are asking for it, please let us know. We'll reach out to TADS and get it cleared up.
Thanks, Marilyn. Okay, I briefly mentioned this, but just a reminder that we do have a policy now that everybody has a local tuition assistance committee. We're encouraging you to have 3 to 5 members on it. They should be school and or parish employees, prefer no volunteers. You could have school board or finance council members on this group as well. And this is gonna be the group that helps determine what your local scholarship awards will look like. I feel like some folks didn't really, it's hard to envision like, what is this group gonna do? So I came up with what a sample agenda might look like. And we thought, you know, planning for maybe a couple of meetings of this group. So in your first meeting, you're gonna figure out what's our budget amount for our local awards. What's our pot of money that we have to give out? And then you'll need to look at, or you might even need to create your existing criteria for what those local awards look like. And I think I have a slide that will give you some examples and show you what we mean by that. And then you can document that criteria in a written format, like write them down, and then forward that to school staff who is responsible for recruiting new families, right? So like that could be meeting number 1. And then the meeting number 2, you're gonna have your TADS recommendations that you've gotten from all those applications. And you'll compare that with how much you have available for the local awards. And then, again, TADS will give you a recommendation. You can edit that. I mean, if you want to give them more, give them less. But it is a recommendation, at least based on their family's financial situation. You might have some special circumstances that popped up. Maybe a parent lost their job during the time between applying and awarding. But again, you can address those types of situations in your local awarding. Also looking at bridging awards. So you want to look at last year's awards and make sure that there aren't large gaps or large variances. That's something that NLTF has done year to year. And then compile a list of what your final awards are, and then you're going to give that to your business office so that they can apply it to the tuition records. So this is just an example. I thought it might be helpful for you to see, like, what does a committee do, and how do I structure an agenda, and what work would we do? So I'm going to jump back. There's that criteria slide. So again, just a reminder to, we're encouraging everyone to require a TADS app for any family who wants assistance. Again, if a family doesn't want it, then they can not fill out a TADS app, but then they're just going to pay the full balance, right? Discontinue that local tuition assistance for families who don't apply. Use TADS recommendations as a starting point. Your local committees can modify those as needed. Establish your criteria. And then just, again, a reminder to get rid of those block grants that aren't based on financial need at all. We used to call them parish subsidies. So here's an example of what we mean by criteria. So this is just a fancy word for how do we determine what awards we're going to give. So for example, you might have your pot of money and you might say, okay, every family who applies, we're going to give them a minimum of $250. Like that's our lowest amount. You might have a maximum award where no family is going to get more than $500. And then everything in between is help. You can use your TADS information to help determine those. You might have special considerations for foster children. Again, financial hardships, foreign exchange students, maybe. You can handle your employee discounts in this way. If you have that pot of money and you want every employee to get a certain amount towards their students' tuition at your school, then you can do that on this side of things. And again, I mentioned bridging and special criteria. So for new students. So this is an example of what we mean by criteria. And I'm going to pause there to see what questions might be out there. Okay. Trying to give sufficient wait time. Okay, just a reminder, ESAs, for next year, all families are going to qualify regardless of their income. However, students have to be Iowa residents. They have to be 5 by September 15th, and they have to be enrolled at least 75% full-time. So if you have like a half-day alternate kindergarten program, those students would not qualify because they are not 75% full-time. Just wanted to remind everybody of those three little pieces, big pieces. A couple of reminders that have just come up over the last couple of years. If you have students who are in TK, transitional kindergarten, optional kindergarten, alternate kindergarten, whatever you call it, they have to be designated as kindergarten in your SIS. They can't be preschool. That'll be flagged on the state end. I'm going to let Marilyn and Diane talk about the semester tuition and calculating that piece when you're inputting your tuition in Odyssey. Some things that have maybe come to your attention through the bookkeepers and business managers.
Well, this is Diane. I might just start with, we did that compliance testing that Patty referenced at the beginning of our meeting. And we saw some inconsistencies with how much the schools were getting for their first semester. Sometimes we saw them getting the $3,913, although they should have probably had some funds available on that card. And so there were some inconsistencies in what the students received. So we did put together a checklist or a guide, so to speak. But simply speaking, we'd say you take your tuition, say it's $10,000, take off your MLTF, which would be in Burzell, if you were to happen to get that, and which would be the next 1,000, and then 9,000 divided by 2 for 4,500. So you want to be sure and put that 4,500 in as your tuition and not just putting in 3,913, which would be 50% of your what the ESA was eligible for. So we did put a guide together and we'll share that out with everybody.
Because what we're predicting and going to see is that your students are gonna, or your parents are gonna have money left on their wallet. So even though the ESA is 3,900, they could have more than that available for you to use if it's left on their wallet.
And if I remember correctly from the law, the ESA is to be used first for tuition and fees before our students and parents can go into the marketplace and purchase like the tutoring or the laptops.
Correct. Any questions about accounting details? Okay. A little bit about school boards. I would just encourage you all, again, collaborate with your school boards on, you know, if you're looking next year, what you want your class size limits. I think we have some schools who are getting, they're getting full. They've got some full grades. They've got waiting lists. And so make sure that you collaborate with your boards on what that looks like at your school. Your acceptance priorities. I think with our administrator group, we did talk about this a little bit. You know, whether you're going to give priority acceptance to siblings of current students, those types of things, and making enrollment decisions there. Again, you need to have your school board approve your tuition. Once you figure out what that's going to look like, they need to vote on it in a board meeting. And we hope to have drafts of budgets by the end of March. So keep that in mind. So next steps. We will be reaching out to each school to meet and discuss those pieces that we've mentioned, your cost per student figures, tuition recommendations, that compliance testing piece that we mentioned earlier, your local tuition assistance criteria, parish support for the school, etc. So just keep in mind, like, these are the people that you really want to have at the table for those discussions. The principal, obviously, the pastor, a school board member, and a finance council member. It's good to have all of those people at the table to have these discussions when you're working on your budgets. If you haven't already, start thinking about building your tuition assistance committee, establishing your criteria, setting your tuition, draft your budget, and then those support pieces that I linked in the slides. That parent communication piece, it explains what goes in to your school finance picture, and then creating a tuition package for each family. And again, we have that template for you that, and you might have something else that you use, but we just wanted to give a tool if anyone needs it or has use for it. And finally, I've done this also in the past, but I would just encourage everyone to, you know, those tuition tables that you list on your websites that has parish member, non-ESA, ESA, like you have different tuition figures. I'm gonna go back to list one tuition figure, and then all of that other stuff you can handle on the back side or individually in a tuition package. But just keep it simple. And think about adjusting your marketing strategies. I know folks get nervous when we start talking about raising tuition. I think, you know, some are afraid it's going to scare people off. But we have to adjust our marketing mindset from, you know, we have to have a low tuition figure to what our strengths are as Catholic schools, our Catholic identity, our academics. We are inclusively educating a lot of new students these days. And we still remain an affordable and accessible choice in education here in Iowa. And ESAs have been a huge part of that. So I think we are just about at the end here. So is there anything that I didn't cover that you wish I would have, or that you would like to discuss while we've got everybody here together?
Patty, I have a question. Patty, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
That's for the BAME. Hi. I appreciate the presentation. I'm just kind of doing the math in my head on some of this. And when I hear, for instance, a $2,000 or a $10,000 base tuition, if the ESA is $8,000, that only leaves a $2,000 difference. And when you figure in these other sources, whether it's local tuition assistance or the parish or the MLTF award, at what point do the parents have any skin in this game? I mean, that will cover almost the entire cost of education, if not the entire thing. I mean, I know we had people with credits on their account at Kemper last year. And I just think we have to have the parents having some skin in the game here.
That is, thank you for the question. And that is the reason for our individual meetings to go over those tuition record audits, because we did find lots of interesting information like you are suggesting, or like you just mentioned. We do not want credits on anyone's account. It's not good financial accounting. We want to make sure, and I understand the skin in the game. We want our education to be affordable, but I don't think any parent comes in here expecting free tuition.
I mean, I'm just going to be direct. If you're paying more for your Netflix account than you are to send your kids to a Catholic school, there's a problem.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So I appreciate that. I didn't mean to interrupt you or anything. So
no, that's okay. That's okay. It's a good example.
Yeah.
Streaming is expensive. But I do think we had a couple of years, you know, the first year that the ESA was passed, we had so much scrambling to do. Everybody, the bookkeepers, the business managers, the school administrators, the ESA coordinators, everybody was scrambling. And we did, and I mean, we all did the best we could, but that year we had a lot of families who probably didn't pay anything. And we don't want to get into that habit, because we know that we didn't have accurate cost per student figures at that point. Our tuition figures were extremely artificially deflated. Again, because we didn't want to scare people off. So we put our tuition figures out there that were low, because we didn't want to scare people off, but they weren't accurate. It wasn't accurately reflecting what it actually costs us to educate kids. So I hear what you're saying, and that's really what we're trying to do with all of this work, trying to help schools get an accurate cost per student figure, get their tuition closer to that piece. And then every family should have something to pay. But it's based on what they can afford.
That's fair. Thank you for all your work. You guys have done a great job. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you to the finance office has been extremely helpful to me. We've done a lot of collaborating and have learned a lot from each other. I hope that but it's
Absolutely.
great. They're great help, so. What other questions are out there?
Hey Patty, this is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, can we circle back? I'm sorry, and maybe other people understand it, but the flexible tuition model is just so different than what we have used in the past. So I am trying to figure it out. So like our cost per student, should that include the entire operating budget, correct or not correct? And then like, how do we, like, let's say the parish gives us $50,000. So then do we apply that to students who maybe don't qualify for MLTF, or it just looks so different than what we've done in the past? Every student, like this year, if they didn't have an ESA, every student got like $3,000 parish support, but that's no longer correct.
Well, that's what we're encouraging you to get away from, because some families might need more than $3,000, and some families probably don't need anywhere near that. So we want whatever that gap is to be determined by a TADS application. That's why we're really kind of beating that to death. Is if a family fills out a TADS application, then you know what their need is. And instead of giving that block grant to everybody, whether they need it or not. Is that?
I think so. Yes. And like I said, it's just so different than how we have done it in the past. So
Yes. Yeah. And that's really why I know it's hard, Sarah. It's hard to get away from old habits, and it's hard to see how something can be done differently. But that's what we're here to help with. So we can certainly, when we have that individual conversation with you at St. Mary's, then we can help you figure out that piece. And I think, Diane might be able to speak a little bit more to it also, but what that looks like on the TADS side is you're going to put in your published tuition figure. And I keep using 10,000, but it might be 7, it might be 8, it might be 11, whatever your figure is. They're going to know that $8,000 comes off for an ESA. And then they're going to know whatever that balance is. Here's what we think this family can afford to pay based off of their financial information they've submitted.
okay.
And Sarah, you brought up a point that I think I've seen at other schools that causes confusion. I think some schools have felt like the dollar amount of parish support is also the dollar amount that is given out in local awards to students. But from a finance perspective, we don't see it that way. Parish support is one of several revenue sources for a school. And the parish support isn't going to support only tuition assistance to kids. It's also going to help increase your salaries and pay all the other operating expenses of your school. So those two dollar amounts don't tie out at all, really. But we really felt like it's a difficult financial concept to communicate. So that's why we want to kind of do it on a one-on-one meeting. So I think, like Patty kind of rolled out for us, the school does their preliminary budget, and then they're going to work back into what, you know, what they're going to ask their parish for support. And then, of course, there's collaboration between the parish governing board, the school governing board. What's that number going to be? And then within that budget, there's also a number on how much you can afford to give for local awards. And when we come to you with a sample that, you know, it's, and I give all the credit to Marilyn, she did the work on this. We want to show to you how much your parents were really paying in tuition, you know, so we might have sampled maybe 25 of your kids. And so we'll show you, well, this was your gross tuition, and then all the different components of it down to how much your family actually paid for tuition.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be anxious to meet with everyone and, you know, to see how it plays out.
And
Yeah.
I think the spreadsheet that Marilyn created can be the source document for you to start your 25-26 year, where you can have all of your, if you weren't already using a spreadsheet, it's how you could create a spreadsheet for next year to make this variable tuition model work. So we want to be there kind of hand in hand with you, kind of showing how that could work.
Thank you, ladies. That's all I've got.
Okay. What other questions are out there? Probably a lot, but. Okay, well, you know where to find us. So if they come up as you're doing this work back at your local sites, please give us a holler. And then we will be reaching out to each of you to go over those individual tuition audits together and learn from those as well. So, but again, I know this is a ton of work. And it's daunting work. So thank you for all of you in working together to just help your schools and your parishes. Our goal is to just keep everybody financially strong long into the future. So these little steps are hopefully getting us there. And we are recording this, so we'll share this out. And as I mentioned, we'll share out the PowerPoint slides as well, and we'll have the links to those documents. So, okay. Thanks to everyone for joining and hanging in there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Bye.